Welcome to the Collective Genius Podcast, the show for real estate investors who are looking to scale.
Welcome back in. It's my favorite time of the week. It is CG, the podcast and the community where real estate investors come to grow and scale their business. And I feel like I'm in the 1970s or 1980s, not only because I'm old and I grew up in the 80s, but also I remember when you had to get someone via satellite when they were coming in from another country. And I think this is a first for CG, the podcast. I actually have one of our members that happens to live across the pond that is our guest today. I'm so excited to share another member with you this week, and joining me live via satellite from London, England, Mr. Ryan Weimer. Welcome in, my friend. How are you?
Leon, I am doing fantastic. The sun was shining today in London. It was a beautiful day. What a rare event.
Cha-ching.
So,
it's usually July when you guys see the sun over there.
Yeah, about half of the month. Yep. Half of 1 month. Exactly.
That's I spent 2 weeks in London a long time ago, but I was told that, if you really want to come over in the best weather, it's during the time of Wimbledon. It just seems to be magic, that 4th of July type of, or week before 4th of July over there. So generally going across the pond, it seems to be the best time, but you actually live there. We're going to get into that story. Obviously, there are a few members that we have that invest stateside but live abroad. There's a great story to be told there. Obviously, we'll get into all of that. But before we get into why you're in London and how you got there, let's start. Set the tone here out of the gates of where you invest in, what your niche is, and type of volume that you do. Just set the tone for everybody that's joining us here to let them know what type of investor you are and how long you've been in the business.
Absolutely. So our company's OfferNow, Idaho. We're headquartered in Boise, Idaho. We do deals statewide. We don't go to the north side of the state. That's Chad Young's territory, if you will. But anything in southern Idaho, we do roughly about 120 to 140 deals a year, mix of fix and flip, wholesales, rentals, creative finance. I've got 4 Airbnbs. Have also dabbled in some new development. Team of 16 now, so we've doubled in the last year, which is really exciting.
Wow.
But yeah, my thing has always just been building a business that lasts, and crafting that from lessons that I've learned along the way. When I first got into real estate, I was like rental obsessed. We can go into why that was, but I didn't realize the opportunity cost that I was having just in terms of cash on hand and not being able to reinvest back into the business, which has so much of a bigger ROI. So we can talk about that if you want, but that's a little bit about us. And I set up everything virtually from the start. So I've actually never lived in Boise, Idaho, which I always tell people that it blows their mind. But I was living in San Diego at the time that we started the company.
I remember the first time that we talked, it was via Zoom, and you were still in San Diego at the time. And you had been introduced by another member that said, "Hey, this is somebody in my backyard." And then I get on the Zoom with you, and you're like, "No, I'm not in this backyard. I do business there, but I'm actually in San Diego."
Yeah.
Which is, it's why I love this industry so much, and why I love doing this podcast, because there's so many different ways to build a business in real estate investing. There's so many different verticals underneath the umbrella of real estate. And then there's people like yourself that you've never lived. Now, it doesn't mean you don't go there, but you've never lived in the market in which you invest in. And it's just, it's mind blowing if you're typically on the outside looking in. And for some people, it's mind blowing that are in the industry. So this is, Ryan, you may be the first person I think we've had on the pod that's a member that invest in a market that you've never lived in. So this is going to be a treat for everyone. So these are, I like to focus on this pod. We have over 500 members. I want to focus on our membership base, who I feel like is the most elite level real estate investors across the country. And I want to know their journey, because the type of person that is listening to this is either, a real estate professional at the same level, someone that is, trying to grow and scale their business, maybe someone that's considering it. There's all different levels that listen to it. So I like to get that journey of how someone got to the level that you're at, especially someone that's never lived in that market, and how you established that. But before we get into all of that, I know what your career was before this, because we've had many of this conversation. And I want to get to that. But before, let's go all the way back. Young Ryan, what is it that you were when you were first, whether that was 6th grade, 10th grade, what was it that you said, this is what I want to be. This is what I want to do with my life?
Yeah, grew up in a W-2 family, was definitely blessed. My dad was an engineer. My mom worked in the government, and I had never been exposed to any kind of entrepreneurship and even sales. So I went and got my degree in engineering myself. So I was very math and science dominant, but I also played college football as well, Division II Colorado School of Mines. So I think that helped round me out a little more than like your super technical engineers that can't really talk to people or have social skills. And so what I didn't really realize about that experience is, yes, out of college, I got an engineering job. I got laid off from the first one, got a second one. Ultimately, that catapulted me towards real estate. But what I didn't realize is I was really building the foundational pieces of grit that entire time, of what it was going to take, and figuring myself out at the same time. Leon, I had no idea what I wanted to do, right? I literally went to college because I thought that was the thing to do. I didn't even know, like I said, about sales. I didn't know that there was any kind of field you could work in where what you put in is relative to your income or what you get. So this evolution for me, jumping into real estate, it definitely did not happen overnight. It was like a 3-year process. And then my engineer brain got in the way, and I got too analytical about it and got analysis paralysis. And ultimately, it was pain in that corporate job that drove me to start a side hustle. And so then I double dipped. Actually, I double dipped in real estate in my corporate job. The first time I was on Steve Trang's podcast, I had just quit my corporate job like a month prior. It's pretty crazy. So I had built the business during lunch hour, weekends, and nights, cold calling myself for about 3 years before I fully quit that corporate job and went full time.
Now, you didn't fully answer the question, because your dad was an engineer.
Yes.
Is that what you wanted to be? Because, I mean, it's very rare that someone plays college football and gets an engineering degree and becomes an engineer. Typically, jocks and engineering don't always go together. But it explains a lot of why you've been very successful, very competitive side. Plus, engineers understand how to build things. Was that what you followed the model of your parents, or is that what you really truly said, this is what I want to do?
Well, truthfully, I only applied to 2 places. So I went to high school in Colorado, and I applied to University of Colorado and Colorado School of Mines. Those were the only 2 places I applied. And Colorado School of Mines just happened to be the top public starting salary school in the nation, because it's only engineering. So it like skews the data, and they can say that they're number one. But that played a huge factor into my decision. And then the fact that I could also play football there was, so I was financially motivated at a young age, plus naturally gifted in math and science. I just hated anything reading, English. It was brutal. And so I think some of that was just my genes, but yeah, ultimately, like I went to the place that I could kind of have it all. So it wasn't just like a hope and a prayer. It was thought out. My engineer brain wouldn't let me.
So, all right, you graduate, you become an engineer. What type of engineer specifically?
Mechanical.
Okay. For those of us that are not mechanically inclined, what is it that you were doing as a job day to day?
Yeah. So, my first job, I was in oil and gas, and so I was looking at compressor engines that pump basically natural gas once it comes out of the ground to a station to get processed and then end up in your home. And then my second job, I was working at a semiconductor company working on laser lithography systems. So machines that would build chips, like for Samsung and Intel, Micron, those TSMC, a lot of the names that you hear today that are in the big AI race for tech.
So I asked that for a very specific reason. And you and I have had this conversation before that the most successful W-2 worker that comes over into real estate that I have seen in my 7 years with Collective Genius on this side, it has been engineers. And I like to think that the biggest reason is the understanding of building teams, systems, process. Would you agree with that?
I do. Yes. Yeah.
That's something that it's, not every engineer is cut out for it, because obviously when building out teams, you can automate a lot of things, but you still need human beings. And the ones that, like yourself and Casey Ryan and others that are within the group, do a really, really good job of building out systems, but also understanding that I can't just do this through automation. I actually have to hire really good people. And, that's part of, and we'll get to that in a bit, but that's part of your success as well, is that you can do both. And systems and process being one of the biggest reasons I see engineers succeed on the real estate investment side. Why do you think that for those that, are looking to scale, that piece of it is so important?
I think it's just finding the weakness in anything, right? Like our entire day, and thankfully, like the way that I was always a hard worker and I was always trying to achieve and always get that next promotion, right? And fortunately, that granted me a lot of freedom as well. So I did get promoted pretty early into a less technical project lead role. So I wasn't actually the person turning the screws or designing the system. I was actually more of a project manager on this big deliverable. And my job was to find bottlenecks. And then when we solved one bottleneck, we'd move on to the next, right? And business works exactly the same way. So there's just a little bit more risk involved when you're doing it yourself as an entrepreneur and you're trying to figure stuff out. But the thought process, critical thinking, problem solving is the exact same.
That makes total sense. That project management piece. We were talking about this on your podcast about middle managers and middle managers making really good operational managers. And obviously you were managing projects, so therefore you had to manage people. That makes total sense now. What was it, when was it in your engineering career when you said that side hustle came to you? Why real estate? Where did that influence come from?
Yeah, it was out of pain. It wasn't like I stumbled upon real estate and was like, wow, this is really cool. I had been laid off from the first job because the price of oil went from like $110 a barrel down to $40 in a couple of months. So I got laid off, and here I am like 2 years out of school. I just got laid off from a job. I'm like, what the hell did I just do? I spent 5 years getting this engineering degree, and now all of a sudden it's time to be a grown up, so when I got that second job, I got promoted fast. And I was traveling all over the world. I mean, it was a pretty sweet gig. Like I was going to Korea, I was going to Europe all the time, to Taiwan. And then I was taking on more and more and more. And so eventually for the next promotion, I was doing my job plus half of that job just to show my superiors that I could be the right person for that fit. And they passed me up because I wasn't a certain nationality. Like literally my manager came in and said, the reason you didn't get the job isn't because you can't do the job, is because we wanted to hire someone Dutch, because we're a Dutch owned company.
Wow.
and they would get along better with other people.
With you, but
I exactly. And so the second that happened, I was like, holy, yeah, he definitely wasn't supposed to say that. But knowing that was actually the truth, whether he said it or not, that was the beginning of the end for me. I was just like, I got laid off once. Here I am again. Like I'm already doing half the job plus my own. I am not in control here. I have to find out a better way to get to where I want to go.
that's that leap that you have to get there. And we talked about this on your pod, is that you just never know when someone that, may be degreed up, maybe a very high professional that you've been talking to about coming into your business and helping you grow and scale it. You just may never know, if you continue to have those conversations, when those type of interactions happen in a corporate setting, that someone just says, I'm done. And if they don't have, like in your particular case, you were like, all right, I'm going to figure this out on my own. But I'm sure if you knew somebody that was looking for, a partner or a high-level executive to run, you probably would have looked at that as an option because you were at your wit's end.
100%. But Leon, I was so green. I mean, like from the point that I decided that I needed to make a change, it was 3 years before I made the jump. So literally like that first year, I was looking up app ideas, like designing an app. Should I buy ATM machine? Should I buy a window washing business or start a window washing business? Like real estate was one of those things that just made a lot of sense to me, I think, because of the numbers and the tax benefits and like diving deep into the tax code, because I absolutely hate paying taxes, and which is ironic because now we live in London, but we can go into that we can go into that later if you want. But no, I think that process, just like figuring it out, it wasn't like the next week I was all of a sudden starting the real estate thing. And I think that's, if there's one thing that the listeners could take away from this, it's that the Rocky cutscene, this is my favorite Alex Hormozy quote, but the Rocky cutscene in the movie lasts 30 seconds. And in real life, it can last 5 years, So like that is so key, that there is this period of trying stuff. No, that's not it. Trying stuff, growing more confident in the ability to take action and then taking action. And that did take me a long time.
So let's talk about, that's a perfect segue to taking action. Like when you landed on real estate, other than a coin operated business or all these other, businesses that you were looking at, when you landed on real estate, do you remember the first deal?
I do. It was off the MLS. I was still working as an engineer, which absolutely catapulted me into financial freedom. So yeah, this whole time I've kind of been poo-pooing on the W-2 job, but in reality, it made me very lendable. So I was able to buy my first 4 or 5 properties just with conventional financing. And then my tax returns were still good enough, plus my assets. Even after I quit, I was still able for a period of time to qualify conventionally. And that really set me up, because that was right around, that was during COVID, right? So interest rates were lowest. So it was a huge opportunity for me. That first deal, it was just a bread and butter single family home. Back then, median price point in Boise was about $200 to $250, and it was a $200K property. We put a little bit of work in, and we ended up refinancing 6 months later, and it cash flowed $150 a month. And when I saw that, the power of that, pulling that money back out and then getting $150 a month, which is not a lot of cash flow, by the way, right?
No.
But just seeing it happen, and that I just got the check every single month while I'm still working as an engineer, I was like, I'm totally addicted. I want to do this as many times as possible.
You're absolutely hooked, especially because you were winning. You weren't losing. 150 is not a lot, but you weren't losing, and you were bankable, so you had leverage. There's a couple different things I wanted to follow up on that. Number one, that so often gets overlooked when people are looking to make a jump into real estate, is that your best bet is to make sure that you use all of the things that a W-2 provides you, which is you're much more bankable, especially out of the gates of your entrepreneur journey. you're much more bankable when you have that W-2. It's crazy to think of that, but banks want to know that someone has a steady income coming in, and so you're a lot more bankable when you have that W-2. The second piece of it is that you buried the lead here because you made this jump in the real estate, but you didn't make it in your backyard because you were living, if I remember correctly, in San Diego at the time that you bought. How did you land on Boise?
Yeah, it's so funny. I actually get asked that question more than any other. I just couldn't afford anything in San Diego. I mean, I was still making, I was making about 120, 130 as an engineer in San Diego, which is actually not that much. But the cheapest single family home in San Diego at the time was like $700,000. So there's no way that the numbers just don't work. My college roommate and best man, Corey, who's now our COO, he was born and raised in Boise. And so I had been doing a lot of research, looking for population growth, job growth, and income growth. And Boise checked all the boxes. Idaho was, per capita, even now with migration trends, it's always at the top of the list, but it's checking all those boxes for me. Plus I had somebody that grew up there. And so it was really not any more complicated than that.
It's amazing how you landed there. But I hear this from California-based investors that may be looking to scale, and they'll say, if I'm going to scale, I have to get out of California. I'm like, that's not always the case because we have plenty of California-based members, or Oregon or Washington, some of those higher price markets. But, in order to scale, especially when it comes to rentals, you have to start, most people have to start looking into other markets. And you landed on one before 22 was one of the, from an appreciation standpoint, was the highest growth. And we'll get into what happened 22, because that's definitely a part of your story. All right. So early on, what was the biggest lesson, as you're making this jump, you're just buying rentals at the time, you're still working full time. What was the first true lesson that you learned that maybe you made a mistake right out of the gates, and it may have cost you a little, may have cost you a lot, but it was a learning moment?
Yeah, so it was definitely putting rentals before the business. So I actually got rental obsessed because I was drinking the Bigger Pockets Kool-Aid of passive income, right? This illusion of passive income. And I didn't realize that a good salesperson on your team can bring in over $1 million a year, just one person in revenue. And so I got cash poor. So I was buying every single rental that I possibly could. Rates were really low. I didn't want to pay anything in taxes. We were getting really good discounted properties, but it definitely did not set me up for success. I'd be way further ahead if I bought less rentals, just stowed away some cash to be able to afford better people, better marketing channels, and invest more into the business. So I actually did the opposite of what a lot of people do, which is I bought too many rentals.
It is something is common that we see, because typically, you have the person that has grown their business, especially here in the last 5 years, that has grown their business off of wholesaling, novations, ways of doing deals without putting a lot of your own capital in place, and have a very active income, and now want to grow the other side. But traditionally, people that were high income earners on the W-2 side, you do see that piece where they own a bunch of doors, but they have no active income coming in. And so that's where the community really helps, right? You can solve for one or the other pretty easily by getting the blueprint for someone else. But by the time you had, applied here to CG, you had figured that piece of it out.
Yes.
It's on full time. When were you able to make that jump? You mentioned 3 years. Was that 3 years of after you started buying rentals?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It was, so right around the time I got that first property off the MLS, the second property I got off of Craigslist, so it was off market. And then that's how I discovered wholesaling. So that was a wholesaler. And so he wholesaled it to me. And I was like, what is this assignment fee that you're getting? Oh, it's wholesaling. And then I was like, oh, so there's a way that I can find I can legally insider trade with real estate, right? I can buy a property in day one. I know that I've made money. I can't do that in the stock market. I don't know any other asset class that I can do that. So that is when I started really getting after cold calling. It was pretty quick, right after I bought that first rental and the second rental, and then 3 years of cold calling. Yeah.
So cold calling, had you start building a team in Idaho, or is this still a virtual option or a virtual operation?
So I was doing everything virtual for about the first year, and then had hired a couple VAs to help me with that stuff. And then I hired my first acquisitions manager in Boise, and that really changed everything for me. I was able to get like 1.5 times the deal size, convert at almost double the rate. That was when I really understood the power of being in person. Not to say that virtual acquisitions doesn't work, because we also meet with sellers over Google Meet and Zoom, right? But really having that in-person presence was a total game changer in this. So that was in 2020 when we hired the first virtual acquisitions person. Or in-person acquisitions person.
In-person, right.
Yep.
So now you start to have in-person 2020. Compared to that day where you had your first person, what does a team look like today compared to then?
Yep. So we've got 3 closers. So 3 on the acquisition side, all in person. And then we have 4 lead managers at the moment. Half of them are in Boise, the other half are virtual. And then I have an operations manager who's also our TC, and then my COO, and then a team of 9 virtual assistants in-house.
So a total of how many?
I believe, what is that, 18?
I love.
Roughly. Oh, geez.
I know that you've gotten to a CEO. You've elevated into that leadership visionary role when you go, you know what, I'm going to have to get with my COO on how many that is. I think it's 18. That speaks to the power of the individuals that you have on your team, especially Corey, your COO. You know, you've hired some great people that run in day-to-day operations that allows you. You've always been virtual, but now you have an operation in town where you are how many time zones away now from your home market?
7 hours ahead. 7 hours.
So you're 7 hours ahead. You know, it's a good time to get to how you got to England. So again, your home market is Boise. When I first met you, you lived in San Diego when you started this business, and you go from San Diego to London. I know the story. Love for you to share it with the audience.
Yeah. So, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and what a better time to make a move halfway across the world, right? I mean, yeah, you got to be a little bit insane to do something like that. But
you do.
My wife really, really wanted to live in London specifically. It's her favorite city in the world. And so we had been preparing a couple years prior for her to land a gig that would sponsor her on a 5-year visa over here. Thankfully, because of how much I love travel and I love just the freedom, the location freedom of setting up things virtually from the start, I was able to, I could go anywhere, right? So I think now that comes with its own unique challenges as well. But yeah, we packed up our stuff. My wife gave birth, and then literally we flew over with a 3-month-old and 11 suitcases and our husky to London. And we had never seen our rental property before we got here. We actually booked one in the ghetto. Like Julia's friends, my wife Julia's friends went and scouted it because we already put the deposit down, and they were like, no, you can't book that one. So we lost our deposit there, booked a different one, and they were like, okay, there's a playground nearby, and it's good. So she had a couple of her best friends from college already living here, which was part of the draw. So that's how it all happened.
I've been there, not moving to a foreign country, but as close as one could get while living in the United States, moving my pregnant wife to Hawaii. and having to find an apartment and a hospital and an OB and all those things that you don't think about when you're making these type of moves. But good, that you early on realized that travel was a big part of what you wanted to do in your life, and you set a business up that you could live the lifestyle that you wanted to live and still have a very successful business. I am so impressed by, when I say younger investors, it's typically the investor that is in there, between 30 and 45. That's usually a younger investor that's been in the business 5 to, let's call it 10 years. I'm so impressed on how you included have set up businesses that are not necessarily built around the business. They're built around you first. And then second, you built a business that allows you to do you first. That didn't happen in the generation that I grew up with, my grandparents, my parents. You just didn't do that. You go to work and you show up every day and, you do whatever they tell you to do. And you guys are like, no way. I'm building a business for my lifestyle. It doesn't mean I'm running a lifestyle business. I am still growing and scaling a business to compete with the biggest players in those regions and those in the entire country. You're like, no. We're still going to have a lifestyle, but we're going to build an actual business. So I wanted to clarify that, because it's not like you're running this business where you're sitting on the beach drinking, pina coladas all the time. You're actually running a big business, but you've never lived in that home market. I just, applaud you for, building something that, quite frankly, my generation and older, we didn't think that was possible. And you guys have shown it is possible.
Well, with technology now, specifically like Google Street View and Zillow, I mean, you can be there without being there. It's funny. I was just in Boise about a month ago, and I saw 9 of my doors for the first time. I bought them 4 years ago. I'd never seen them. So, which is insane, right? It's weird to say that, but like I'd never actually been there to see them. Now, being halfway across the world and also being virtual does come with its own set of challenges. So when we moved over, we definitely had some rose-colored glasses of what it was going to be like. I'm never the type that's going to be on a beach somewhere sipping Mai Tais. Like I was always going to be the CEO of the business and move that forward. But interest rates changed literally the next month. We moved in May of 2022. They changed in June of 2022, and it was all hands on deck, man. So what went from, I'll work late into the evenings, London time, 3 or 4 days a week, it became a 7-day-a-week thing. So it's not for the faint of heart, but totally to your point, Leon, like so many people set up their life to fit their business, and that's backwards. You have to set up your business to fit your life, right? And so does me being virtual and not being in Boise cost us money? Yeah, it actually does cost us money. It would be more efficient and more effective for me to be in Boise, no doubt, but we wouldn't be able to live the life that we want. So that's what we prioritized.
Let's go back to, because there's some life lessons to learn. When you moved, I remember this like it was yesterday. There were really, and this crazy to think that was now 3 years ago, right?
I know, isn't it?
The market was on this it was already, inventory was already really low. Prices had continued to go up, and then COVID hit, and we weren't sure where it was going to go, but it was rocket fuel for the market. Moving to Tampa, when I moved to Tampa here, I mean, houses that were listed for $500,000 a year prior to that were already $1 million and above in certain neighborhoods here. And so it just put this extra fuel on the fire. And Boise was one of those markets. At the same time, I remember April of 22, when the interest rates, they changed March of 22, but really about April, May, and June of 22, Boise was one of the highest appreciation. I remember it was like 118% or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was Boise, it was Reno, it was Salt Lake, it was Austin, all the places where a lot of people had migrated during COVID into, all of a sudden, those houses that you had under contract that the resale value was, if it was $500,000, all of a sudden it was now worth 300 or less. How from 7 time zones away, how did you handle that with your team? Because there's a good lesson here for everybody to learn.
Yeah, I don't know if handle it is the right word. I mean, we got kicked where the sun don't shine. You know what I mean? So like, that's a part of entrepreneurship is, you can't defeat someone that never quits. And so that's the attitude that we had as a team where, all right, time to batten down the hatches, learn some, very valuable lessons along the way. Like I said before, had bought too many rentals. So we were in a position where in March 2022, I remember we got 22 offers on a starter home flip that we had finished. And then here about 4 to 5 months later, all of a sudden we're getting no offers 60 days on the market on some of our properties for sale. And so that it really, I wouldn't say that it changed overnight, but the problem is your projects and stuff that you're acquiring and taking on, your cash conversion cycle balloons very fast. And all of a sudden it becomes a big liquidity issue. So it really was all right, we have to make some difficult decisions. Let's try to cut bait on some of these as soon as we can and just reduce until it gets sold. I wasn't around in 08 and 09, so regrettably, it was a little bit more painful for me because it was more death by 1,000 cuts. I wish I had been more swift in hindsight and decision making of just taking the losses. But emotionally, it was really tough. So, yeah, I was working till 3 a.m. here locally, and sometimes 4 or 5 a.m. in London. Me and my wife have been on completely opposite shifts, with our now 3-year-old, and it's just about making it, right? Because some years you're just gonna get kicked in the nuts, and you just have to persevere through it. Now I'm so thankful that we did, because last year was really the first year where it felt like things were somewhat stable. The problem, Leon, is with what we do in finding discounted properties, if there's too big of a gap between what a seller thinks their property is worth or what they're willing to take and what the market will actually pay, like there comes a point where that gap just becomes too big. If it's like 6 figures, even for a motivated seller, their neighbor's property 6 months ago sold for X. Well, the market's declining. It's now worth way less than that. You're not going to overcome that. So like the problem is, like, even with interest rates really high, as long as it's a stable playing field, that's a great market for us to work in. But when there's too big of a delta on what is actually reality and what a buyer will pay for a property is where you really get into trouble.
I remember having those conversations about Boise often, because that was the biggest issue, is that the news was slow to get to sellers. The news of, hey,
Yes.
This market, especially in Boise, is being affected, where they thought that their house was still worth $1 million because, Jed's house next door sold for $1 million and we have a better house than his. Well, that number is no longer the number. You said something there that I want to, there's so much good there that I want to pinpoint real quick before we move on. I don't want to gloss over this. You said that you would have made quicker decisions during this looking back. And I think that's super important. I think where we're going next is how this community has helped you. And I think that that's something that I know that we would do all hands on deck calls with those members that are more sage, that have been through market cycles. I remember one specifically saying, we have projected $2 million of loss, and we're taking loss because we know we have to act swiftly to get that inventory out so we can reset. And I know that if you've never been through that downtime, and you had been through markets that just continue to appreciate, especially, my goodness, in your market. And so I know that we were getting that from our side. So outside of making swift decisions, looking back on that run, is there something else that you would have done better or differently before that happened?
Yeah, just the obvious answer, which is more cash on hand. Now, luckily, I had a ton of equity in the property, so I could get really scrappy with it. But having more cash on hand and it bothered me, Leon, for a long time, wholesaling a property and making $30K when I could flip it and make 60, or hold it as a rental refi and then get all that cash tax free. And for some, I don't know if it was ego or just my engineer brain, but the thought of paying taxes when I really wasn't maximizing, the profit amount per deal. I just didn't understand cash conversion cycle and money management. And so that is something that I would change. Is it's not always the best idea to maximize money on every single deal, because having cash on hand helps you make far better decision making. And again, investing in marketing channels and people and systems, and your business is going to produce a way higher ROI than any property you keep.
I could not have said that better. In fact, it's something that I know that Jason, having found this organization 14 years ago, if there's any lessons that I've learned from him and many others within this community, is that the cash piece of it is the maturity of the business owner. When you get to a point where you understand that getting all the meat off the bone isn't the most important thing for the health of your business. Marcus Krigler, who I've got to have on the pod here soon, CPA and a CFO only for real estate investors, he did an award-winning, belt-winning presentation on the 10 most common business practices that his top real estate investors do. The 10 most common things that how they operate. And one of those 10 is they always have liquidity of at least $1 million, at least minimum. And so when I think about that, and especially where the market was going, I asked you that question specifically because the people that said, I am taking $2 million worth of losses, I know it. I've been a good steward of the business, and I can do that and sleep well at night because I know that I've had a great run here. So I think there's so much from that example of what you gave there of how people should operate or look at operating, especially if they're rental heavy or flip heavy. Because there's liquidity when these type of events happen. These black swan events allow you flexibility and the ability to make calm, quick decisions that are best for your business long term.
Totally, and none bigger, Leon, than the one that I definitely do want to talk about. My biggest loss was a $1.2 million development deal. I lost $1.2 million on a single deal, and I'll tie that into what became of that, because everything in life where I've had a big failure or a small failure, it's actually catapulted me into the next thing. And so I'll explain what ended up happening as a result of that. But as most people do when they're full of piss and vinegar and they're young and they're all gas, no brakes, they start getting a little bit of shiny object syndrome. And when the market is going up, sure, we'll look at land and do development deals, even though we've never done them before, even though we don't have a project manager boots on ground, or we had one at the time that was, not very skilled. And what that particular lesson taught me was, number one, how awesome of a support group CG is, because I would have never made it through that without calls to certain individuals and really getting through that, and you as well, Leon. But what ended up coming out of that is now we do this thing, Leon, called Weimer method. And I actually presented at the last Collective Genius on it, but it's where we get a creative finance deal and we get a seller to agree to a 0% note, and we secure that note against a different property, one of our rentals. And then we sell that property and we get all the liquidity from that sale. So in the last year, we've generated over $2 million in cash at 0% interest. And that is a skill now that I have for the rest of my life. And it came out of necessity, because I didn't have any liquidity when I took that big of a loss. I didn't have $1.2 million to lose. And so it's given me goosebumps now, because now we have that skill for the rest of our life, where we're sitting on more liquidity than we've ever had before, even though we've gone through a real estate recession.
The amount of lessons that are learned through losses. I mean, this is everything in life. I mean, it's kids sports. It's, you playing, Division II football. There's so many lessons learned from the bumps and the bruises, if you truly want to continue to get better. And I know when I hear that 1.2 million, I want to throw up in my mouth just a little bit. But I know and remember those conversations, and I'm a fixer by nature, and I wanted to help in any way that I could, but I didn't, other than being there for you. I didn't know what else that I could do. But I knew that if they're, our type of member like you, they're going to figure it out at some point, and probably on the other side come out better, even though at the time it's really hard to see that. I'm sure it was hard for you, but congrats on taking a bad situation and turning it into, and look, you've also got some skill there where maybe you don't go and do a bunch of development in the future, but you now know what not to do in those development deals in the future, should you go down that road. So you referenced it a little bit about the community. Give me some of the things that, being a part of the Collective Genius, like maybe you've learned, the relationships that have been crucial. Like, give me a few things that have helped you through the way, like on this journey to continue to grow and scale.
Man, where to start? I've been in a few other masterminds. What I can say is unique to Collective Genius is that there's no ego at all. Like, literally, you want to know 20 years of someone's experience in their business, they'll share everything with you. And that is just a testament to the CG leadership and what Jason has created of truly being a go-giver and leading with value. And when you have an environment like that, it's such a rare and special thing that you're just inspired to give. And it's this like self-feeding thing. And it is crazy the amount of knowledge that is shared in that room. So yeah, of course, the first couple sessions, it was like you're wide-eyed and you're like, oh my gosh, they're doing 600 deals in a year, and how do I get there? And all the way to the just tactics of hiring better people and getting better at hiring. So that's like on the business side of things. But then on the relationship side of things, I know I mentioned this to you in our podcast, but that emotional toll quarter by quarter of scaling a business, virtually especially, is taxing. Being able to just be in a physical presence with other like-minded people is such an emotional boost, where you actually feel like I'm around my people, and like they have my problems, I have their problems, and we can work together about solving them. So the time that you need community is not when things are exploding and going really great. It's in those dark times where you're really struggling, or you really have something that you're you need some assistance with, because somebody else in the group has not only had a bigger failure than you, but has probably had one very close to when you're having yours. And just having that person to go to and talk through that it's priceless.
That's the most underrated part of CG that it's hard to get across until you come, is when you show up at a meeting and you see all of these, high level people. Let's just say that. Let's just say high level people first that are willing to share. And everyone at some level has an ego, but when it comes to sharing and helping other people get better, it's a culture thing. We just don't allow people in the group that are just in there about them. You have to give value. And I know that you have received a lot because you are always offering help, and your COO is always offering help. You're always presenting, as you mentioned before, you presented at the last meeting. Is there one relationship where you've given some value, and is there one piece of advice that you've given that you can remember that really impacted someone's business or their life? Can you remember one of those?
Oh man, there have been a few. Chad Young and I talk a lot because we have very similar markets, and he's also close in proximity to our market.
He's in Spokane, Washington, and also purchases in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So you're in Boise, Idaho. Did you guys know each other prior to this group?
We didn't. No, we didn't. But I will say, like, it's the conversations that happen outside of CG. I mean, he wasn't doing any novations before. We were already doing some novations. They were fix and flipping at a higher level than us. They were hiring at a higher level than us. They were also doing marketing at a higher level than us. We were doing creative finance at a higher level than them. And so there's just this like incredible symmetry that happens because there's always somebody that's one step ahead of you and one step behind you in the room, right? And so the person one step behind you, you can absolutely help and give value to. The person one step ahead, they can give value to you. And so there's just this organic mutual exchange of value. And so, yeah, just that one relationship alone with Chad has probably doubled our business with the amount of times that we talk and what we share.
Yeah, I love that organic exchange. I love that, how you put that. The goal of our group is, for me, for Jason and anybody on our team, is to build those type of relationships that you have with Chad. When you're at the level that you're at, and a lot of our members are, you want to surround yourself with people that are doing similar things. And so we hope that if you're influenced, by the top 5 people that you surround yourself with, it really determines who you are as a professional and as a person. Then we would always hope that one of the 5 is a CG member, but we ultimately end up finding that typically it's 2 or 3 over time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it definitely happens when there's that organic exchange of going, I can offer you this, and in exchange, it's almost like a bartering system of value, right? Where, this is something that works in my business. You can try it out. Here you go. Here's the process. And in return, I need some help with that. And quite frankly, there's a lot of people in the group that just give even though they, don't receive someone directly. And it's just a culture that's been built over the 14 years. Appreciate you sharing that. Is there, I'll wrap it up with your business and then we'll get into some quick hitters here.
Yeah.
What's next? Where do you see this going over the next 5 to 10 years for your business?
Yeah. So, I have no intention of stopping at all. We want to be a 10 million top line revenue company by the end of 2027. We grew 72% last year, so we are well on our way. We will do, or are projected to do, about 3.5 this year. So we have a ways to go. It's a very aggressive target. But with the systems, process, and data that we have now, it's so obvious. It's so cool. It's not cool when you upgrade CRMs and you go to a beast like Salesforce for like the first 6 months or even year and learning that.
Right.
But now, Leon, it's crazy when you can see the amount of leads that you miss and deals that you miss. It blows the ceiling off of what you ever thought was possible because you can actually see it in the data. And so every year I used to have this, I think we could probably do, 200 deals a year in Boise before we hit a ceiling and we wanted to go to another market, or 300 deals a year, and that every year would increase a little bit. And then when we actually had the data and we saw how many deals we were missing, like I am truly convinced we could get to over 1,000 deals a year in Boise and still not need to go to another market. Like it is, and Boise's only a million people. So it's the data that now has just, I think, helped our team buy into this bigger vision of like, we don't just have to clone ourselves and magically create more hours in a day. The data is showing us all the things that we're doing wrong and how many opportunities we're missing out on. Now it's just about filling people in the right seats and training them to be able to fill in those gaps and capitalize. So that's our big audacious goal for the end of 2027. And we'll see what happens from there. But I fully intend on doing this forever. I just love it. So
Ryan, I'm getting goosebumps hear you talk about your goals, because one of the hardest things when you're putting BHAGs like that out there, of doing, 1,000 deals and $10 million in a market of a million MSA, the hardest people to get to buy into that is the team. And so you're not asking them just to believe, you're showing them actual factual data-driven information to get them to believe. There's so much good leadership in that. Because if you tell someone it's possible, yes, you can get people to run through walls in a short sprint like a cheetah. But over time, for the marathon, for people that are doing this on a daily basis, in order for them to continue to see growth opportunity, they need vision. And they need vision that isn't just pulled out of their backside. They need vision that's pulled from data. That's their engineering side coming out. And then it's a true visionary on a high leadership level. That's why I'm getting goosebumps, because that's a winning formula, not only for you, but to bring up your team as well. There's no doubt in my mind that you'll get it with that type of structure built in vision for the long term. And who knows, even if you fall short of that, the business has still grown significantly, right? It's reached for the stars and, fall amongst the clouds. But then only in that point, you can then make those decisions based on data to either pivot to another market or pivot to another vertical in Boise, because you have a background in obviously developing now. So much good there. I would ask you your superpower, but man, you've already given like a ton of them here. But if you did have to give one, Ryan, what would you say is your superpower?
I really think it's grit, truthfully. Which isn't sexy to say, but when you say things when you have these big audacious goals, right? And the classic visionary is like, okay, here he goes again. The team is rolling their eyes, right? Like he's talking in different tongues and making, it's a euphoric thing. It's not actually like something that it just feels hollow to the rest of the team. Sure. So yeah, I think just grit of telling my team, like, I'm going to do this forever. We're going to hit this target as long as we're improving, getting 1% better, and our data shows we're trending up and to the right. Do I care if we hit 3.5 million this year? No, I don't. Right? And that is such a different mindset shift than most people have, is they set a target and it's either a pass or fail. Like, will we get to 10 million by the end of 2027? I don't know. It could be less. It could be more. I don't care when we get there. Right? It is time bound for the team so we can get buy-in, but like part of being the visionary is absolutely bringing in those pieces that people can actually latch onto, that makes sense, so it feels more achievable. And I think the best A players, they want a visionary who's less euphoric and more of a grinder. And when I say things like, I'm going to do this forever to my team, they know that there's no quitting, right? It's not like Ryan's not going to leave this business in a year and leave us here. And so then you start getting people that also attach part of their identity to this mission, and they really can sink their teeth into it. And that's when you get the discretionary effort of people working into the evenings or people working in the weekends because they want to make more money and they feel more bought into this vision. So that single thing has probably been my biggest takeaway in terms of leadership at CG, that I was completely naive to before. I completely underestimated the value of leadership and really what that meant. It was kind of like a fluff word before, and now I can actually assign it to some tangible measures.
Leadership gives so much, and we've been very heavy over the last couple of years. A lot of the reason we've been so heavy on leadership is because a lot of our businesses have taken that next step because they've realized it's not a fluff word. The culture that you build, the stability and the security that you're building with your team, because they know that you're in it to win it. You're not saying, I'm just living in London, I'm traveling all the time and I'm not involved. They have security because they know that no matter where you are, your focus is to help that business grow, which brings them along. There's stability. In addition to that, the day that you start losing your top level employees is the day that their vision is bigger than yours. If you can't outrun their vision for the company, why do they need you? Like they want to continue to grow. I don't care. A lot of people, that, say, well, I can't find people that don't want to be owners. Absolutely, you can. If you continue to lead the highest level people with a vision that's bigger than they can even imagine, that they can see that they can tie on to and grow with you and help grow the company along. And it's a win-win for everybody. So grit that led to that vision. I love that word, by the way. It's one of my favorite words is grit, because I think that all true entrepreneurs, to start out, if you don't have it, there's a limit on what you can achieve in any business, in my opinion. The grit is what gets you through those hard times, those valleys, that every business owner, that those walls that you hit at some point, you're going to have to grind and grit through. Give me, it's a great superpower. How about something that no one knows about? We've learned a lot here today. Maybe that I don't know about you, that would be interesting.
Something that something that they don't know about me. Probably, I rode steers in the rodeo when I was 13 years old, growing up in Colorado. So that's...
would have never pictured you doing that.
Cowboy hat, spurs, the whole 9 yards. Yeah.
Wow. Yep. And that was just a short window? That was, because I've never seen you in cowboy boots before.
I know, yeah. My parents never let me ride a bull. To be quite honest, I had seen enough accidents with that I was like, yeah, I'll pass. But no, I think it's cool, like when you're in those formative adolescent years, taking risks like that and empowering your children and your parents empowering you to go out and do cool things like that and take risks and see what it's like are really, really crucial to building your confidence. So that was a fun experience.
I love it. Well, growing up in Colorado, I grew up in Kansas, and so I went to my fair share of rodeos. I was a city kid for the most part. Yeah. Going to rodeos, it's like, oh man, this is definitely different culture than what I'm used to growing up in the city, and it just exposes you to so many different things. I think it's super important as us as human beings to venture out and do other things. Like, I love asking this question because, I get to know everyone pretty well out of the gates when, I'm onboarding members into the community. But there's always something that I don't know. Like, I didn't know Mark Latour loved the theater. Like, that's something we share, theater as well. But I didn't know that until I asked him that question, because we had never had a conversation. Now we can have conversations all the time about the theater.
Well, we got to get you guys out to London. I've seen almost all of them at this point. So yeah, that's like the best part of London.
That is a bucket list there. I've been to London, but I have not been to a show. I think I instead of going to the theater, I made it to too many pubs. So I've seen a lot of pubs in London. I was still in my 20s or early 30s when I went. So I can say this, that if I come back, I would not be visiting many pubs. It would definitely be more towards the arts for sure.
I'll you know what's funny, Leon? Yeah, absolutely. I despise musicals on TV and movies. I can't watch them. And then the theater is completely different. And I never thought it would. That was actually the biggest shock moving here, was how much I enjoy the theater when I absolutely cannot watch a musical on TV to save my life.
I would challenge anybody that doesn't like musicals, watching them on television, to go and see one and tell me that like it. Like, it's so much art to appreciate. And I know some people are listening to this going, really? Come on, man. I would never go to a musical, but I'm serious. You should try it. Never know until you try it. All right. I know you're well read, and there's probably a ton of books that you've suggested in the past. And obviously there's different levels where someone is in their journey of what book that you would, recommend. But is there one that's your favorite?
Yeah, I think back to basics. I won't say Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but I will say The Go-Giver. I used to have a scarcity mindset working in a W-2 job. You're just surrounded by people where, if you give praise to somebody or one of your peers, they could get the promotion over you. And because really, no matter how many hours you work in a lot of W-2 positions, you get paid the same amount. Adding any discretionary effort doesn't really net you anything more. So it's very easy to get in this, if you win, then I lose type of mindset. So I read that at the perfect time, like right when I was getting into real estate and starting cold calling. And I'm not going to lie, it took a little while for me to actually see how that works and how giving with value first returns tenfold. And not only that, it doesn't return tenfold only in your pocketbook, but way more emotionally too, right? And it gives you a different level of fulfillment. And that, when I discovered that and I felt that for the first time, and I helped my first acquisitions person buy a creative finance deal at like 1.2% interest, his first property, his primary residence, that was like life altering for me. And that gave me, yes, but I never would have done that, Leon, if I hadn't read that book. That really changed a lot of my perception.
We don't have the culture, the organization, the 4 different levels that we have, unless this entire group community was built around go-giving. Like you can't be in the room unless you're willing to help someone else with their challenge. And there's you can, like you said before, someone that's one step ahead of you, one step behind you can help you. And you can help someone that's one step ahead of you as well, because everyone in the room does something a little bit different. That I think it is that book ultimately is the reason for the success in the culture of this group. And I'm so proud to be able to be associated with this community and people like yourself that understand that are willing to help others, knowing that if you do all these things the right way, that it will reciprocate tenfold, if not more, back to you. Love that one. Thank you for that. It's one of those books that when I'm on a long trip, I'll just listen to the Audible many times as I can. Anytime my wife and I get a long road trip, that's one of them that we put on. Great suggestion. All right.
One more, if I can, Leon.
Yes, please.
On the more tactical side, the sales acceleration formula. I have read and listened to that 8 or 9 times, and I listen to it at least once a quarter on Audible. When you're scaling a team, especially a sales team, it is gold. It is super tactical, and it's written by, I believe, an ex-engineer. So it makes sense for me.
By Phil Green?
Yes. Phil and Eric.
The first time I had heard of that book was NCG. It's one of those, I'm really considering doing a in between the podcast show on just book recommendations from this group, because every meeting I leave, there's always a new book, 10 of them. And I just can't keep up with all of them. But that is one that I remember Phil maybe 4 years ago saying this is a game-changing book. That's a really good one as well. Another level, obviously, of very basic culture building on go-giving, and then accelerating sales at a different level. Thank you for both of those. All right, so you have a great podcast. I was on it recently. If people want to, you've got the Weimer method. Tell me all the things that you have going on right now and where people can find you.
Yeah. So we have a referral program right now for hiring people. So if you know somebody, it doesn't matter if they're virtual or in person, we are always looking for salespeople. So that's our main focus right now. Again, we have lofty targets, and so our biggest need right now is just people in those seats to fulfill them. But if you have any questions about any of this, happy to help you no matter where you are in your journey. You can reach me at Real Ryan Weimer on Instagram. That's the best place to get a hold of me.
And what's the name of the podcast?
It is the Real Freedom Podcast. So it's all about, we start the show off talking about everyone's biggest failure, and then how that has shaped them and molded them into creating financial freedom for themselves and taking back control of their life. And a majority of people that we've interviewed have had some kind of W-2 background and then transitioned into real estate.
Love it. Love the show. Would highly recommend it. And I would take him up on him reaching out. I know this, that if you reach out, he will respond. He's that type of person. A great fit within this community and a great interview today. I appreciate it, my friend. I know it's getting late, your time. So thank you for taking the time today and being on the CG podcast.
Love it, Leon. Thanks for having me.
Much appreciated. So if you would like to be in the room with members like Ryan Weimer, he does make the trip almost 4 times a year. There's very rarely that he misses one, believe it or not, all the way from London. If you want to be in that room or one of those levels that we have, the best way to find out more is to go to collectivegenius.com. That's thecollectivegenius.com. And obviously, if you love this show, we would love for you to like, subscribe, leave a comment, share it with a friend, let everyone know about CG, the podcast. They can also find more information at thecgpodcast.com. Really enjoyed today's episode. We look forward to seeing you on the next one next week. See you then.
Are you ready to scale your real estate business? Visit thecollectivegenius.com, where real estate investors come to scale. Subscribe to the Collective Genius podcast and hit the bell icon to be notified when our next episode releases. And thanks for listening.